Hey everyone. Holy cow. Haven't talked for 2.5 months. I think my last video, which I haven't posted any of these, so they're all gonna be posting consecutively. So you're just gonna get the whole thing right as we go. Ignore my dirty background in my car. I've got clothes back there and the kids left a drink in there. I'm not holding my phone. It's up on a holder, so I'm not holding it while I drive. My last video, I believe, was November 6th of 2020. Today is January 30th, 2021. Happy New Year. My last video, I believe, ended with me waiting for a couple weeks still to have my MRI guided biopsy. I'll be honest, like, this whole thing has just been a whirlwind, and work got crazy, and the holidays were insane, and my sister came to visit and it was amazing, and my mom and my stepdad got COVID, but they handled it fine. You know, they weathered it at home pretty much. My stepdad had gone into the hospital for something else and found out he had COVID. He really didn't even have the COVID symptoms, but he was only there for a couple days, got home, everybody was doing good. My sister, her whole family had it. Knock on wood, the kids and I have been blessed enough to not get it, although I still think that I had it before we actually knew what COVID was, but that's besides the point. So I had my biopsy done. I know part of this whole thing for me is explaining what happens, because I want people to understand procedures and what's going on, because they're gonna have questions like I did. Had it done, it was not that bad. You were laying down on your stomach for quite a while. I had a lot of bruising. I was sore for a couple days, but it was completely tolerable with like ibuprofen. Terrible bruising. So I believe it was a couple weeks before I found out my biopsy results. But my biopsy came back that I had benign atypical ductal hyperplasia, which is basically saying that they're cells that they don't look quite right. You can look it up, you can Google it, you can find pictures. It shows like the normal cells, then like atypical cells, then like a precancer cell, and then cancer cells. So when I got the first phone call, the nurse had just told me that they were calling it just a benign papilloma, basically an intraductal papilloma, but that the standard of care was to have it removed, so they wanted me to meet with the surgeon. They would just take it out. So I met with the surgeon, and he's the one who said it was actually atypical ductal hyperplasia that was benign. So they would go ahead and do the surgery. So we're gonna just fast forward a lot, because I really didn't have anything in between that time in November until I met with the surgeon at the end of December. So lots of anxiety, guys, just waiting, but at least I had that sigh of relief, because my biopsy, waiting for that results from that biopsy was torture. I'm just gonna tell you, I have to say, through this whole process, I've just had to try to learn patience, but I haven't learned it very well. Met with the surgeon. We decided to have a lumpectomy in January. So January 7th of 2021, I had my lumpectomy. I went in. It was an outpatient procedure. I went and had a mammogram done beforehand, so they could place what's called a wire. So they put a wire in, they put a local shot, and then it's just, they place it in. It's like a shot, like a, I don't know how you do it. It's kind of like when they do an IV where they put it in, but they actually pull the needle out, and then it's got like that thing that stays in. So I had that done so that they would know exactly where they're going. I had the surgery. It was like an hour and a half long, not even. Went home. The surgery was not horrible. I had a couple days that were pretty bad. I had nerve pain. So like when your nerves are trying to heal, it's pretty painful. It's like shooting, stabbing pains, and they're not great. Had a follow-up for 2 weeks later. I had my surgery done on a Thursday. I had planned to go back up to work on a Monday. The nurse had written my note for longer than that, because she said sometimes people take up to 2 weeks. I knew I wasn't going to need that. Tuesday, I was still taking some pain medication on Tuesday, so I called and told my boss I decided to go back on Wednesday instead. So Wednesday, that following Wednesday was the 13th. I got a phone call on the 12th asking me to go ahead and come in the next day, the 13th, instead of waiting until the following week for my follow-up. So I'll be honest, even though I'd already been given the results and the biopsy and everything, it made my heart sink, because I couldn't understand why. I had called because I had a small rash, which ended up just being my breast was rubbing against my skin and it just hurt. And I'm like, well, you know, I honestly thought, well, maybe he's wanting to make sure that my incision isn't infected or anything like that, because from the lumpectomy, my incision was probably this long. It goes right along the crease of my nipple, which is actually perfect. You can almost hardly tell. So I called my boss and explained that I actually had an appointment the next day. They completely understood. And told her I'd go to my appointment that next morning, and then I'd be into work that afternoon. So I went into my appointment the next morning. I didn't take anybody with me, obviously. It was just a follow-up. And as soon as I walked in the room, several people followed. And at that moment, I think, was the moment that I knew something wasn't right. So I sat down, and the surgeon came in, and they looked at it, but they didn't really look it over good. So I'm like, this isn't about my rash, this isn't about my incision. And he basically just sat me down, and he told me, he said, we did your biopsy, we got the results, this benign ductal hyperplasia. He said, that's great. He had even told my mom after the surgery that everything looked great, but they still they still send it off for pathology. They send it off to a pathology because instead of a biopsy, you have the full tumor to assess. And that, unfortunately, it sometimes doesn't play out the way it does 90% of the time. And unfortunately, I was one of those cases. I was diagnosed with grade 3. So there's a grading system, 1, 2, and 3. 1 meaning the slowest growing, most look like normal cells, to a 3, which is very aggressive, fast moving replication of cells that look very different. So grade 3 invasive ductal carcinoma. So I in fact had breast cancer. It was a total shock to the gut, because I had been told that it was benign. I had been told, listen, this is great news, that's awesome. Well, he told me, he said, everything did look good. So it was just a shock, I think, to the surgeon and everybody else just as much as it was me. I was not expecting to hear it. Had I known that was going to be the case, I probably would have made someone go with me, but I didn't. So invasive ductal carcinoma, grade 3. They could not stage me because before I'm staged, my lymph nodes have to be tested. I also have associated areas of ductal carcinoma in situ, which is breast cancer that has not made it outside of the ducts yet, so it's not invasive yet, but it still has to go. So I know that I will be having another surgery. That was on the 13th. Today is the 30th. This is going to have to be another video because I'm going to have to stop here in a minute. But they told me that afternoon they had already made me an appointment at 1:30, so I did not go back to work that day. They had made me another appointment for 1:30 to meet with the medical oncologist. I met with the medical oncologist. I was there for 2 hours. They set me up with a breast center navigator. She was amazing. They explained my situation and basically just told me, there's a lot of stuff we still have to find out. So we know it's an aggressive cancer based on the grade of it. We don't know if it's in your lymph nodes yet. My pathology report said very highly suspicious of lymph node involvement, so there is a possibility of that. But they needed my receptor status to tell me what was feeding my cancer, what kind of cancer it was. There's several kinds, which I'm going to go into here in my next video, which I'm going to make here in a minute, and you'll probably get all these videos at the same time. But yeah, so a lot has changed since November. A lot has changed since December when I found out that it was benign and I was good and we could just have it removed. So at 31 years old, I'm being told that I have breast cancer. And It was a shock and it was a hard blow, but I'm doing okay. I had a very overwhelming week that week, but I'm going to update you guys here again in a little bit and explain everything. So tell you where I'm at right now with this journey, as it is, you know, even several weeks later since I found out. So I'm so thankful for any of you that have paid attention to these videos. I just hope that I'm helping educate some women or men who are going through this and have questions. So I will be back, y'all.